Attack power is the word of the day. Well, it's actually 2 words, but we're buffing Geraldo's attack power in this combat focus build with basically 2 shots every single enemy in the game, regardless of their size, which in a way makes it very hard to get footage of because everything dies so fast. So let's go. I think I'm going to do an alchemy build next, but let me know in the comments what you would like to see next. So we'll start with the build summary and then we'll break it all down into the nitty gritty kind of details. So the way this build works is we're using the feline or the cat skull armor, and it is the light armor that gives us the buff to fast attack damage as well as the attack power just inherently in the Witcher gear buffs itself. And the main focus really is just on combat. Now we will use a little bit of signs just because in most builds, even if you're not buffing them, signs are still valuable to use, especially against monsters. But for the most part, we are essentially just buffing our combat skills and combat potential to the absolute maximum and like 2-shotting basically everything in the game. Now, because of this Witcher skull set that we're wearing, the first like 3 piece out of 6 bonus, when you ever use a stronger attack, it will buff your fast attacks. And so essentially we're going to follow up by starting most encounters with a strong attack, which we're buffing with our combat skills, and then just fast attacking to essentially finish off literally everything that you do come across. It won't 2-shot everything. Some enemies will take, more than 2 shots, but essentially most things you can 1 to 2-shot them, even on death march, which is what the footage that you're watching on is on now. The downside to this build is that it is an extreme glass cannon. You will take lots of damage in this build. We're offsetting that with a couple of things that we'll talk about in a little bit, ways that you can improve your defenses, but this is essentially a light armor, like glass cannon combat focused build that would do just absolute wonders on the lower difficulties. If you're playing this on, standard difficulties, I imagine that you'll probably just one-shot everything and just like laugh straight to the bank. But with the deathmatch difficulty, you do have to be a little bit careful about your defenses, especially in the next gen update with the way that they've changed some of the combat balance. So for armor and weapons, for the most part, I am just literally wearing the feline set, which is absolutely fantastic and fits with the theme of this build and what we're doing. Gives you that critical hit chance as well as chance of bleeding, chance of dismember, all that good stuff. Plus the 3 out of 6 bonus strong attacks increase fast attack damage for 5 seconds by 10% for each piece wearing, and because wearing 5 pieces, it's 50%. So 50% attack power bonus to the fast attack damage is really good. Now you could also use the feline sword, the like silver sword. Absolutely no issues, dramas there. You can use that, but when you get into the very later stages of the game, you want to replace that with the Aerondight sword. This sword comes from a particular quest in the Blood and Wine Toussaint expansion. I'll show you where on the map you need to go here, but essentially what this sword does is each blow generates charges, which increases sword damage by 10%. Charges are lost over time, or when you receive damage, which we obviously want to try and avoid that with this build in general, but a fully charged sword also deals critical hit damage as well. So essentially there's that, plus there is also the second bonus where every time you kill something, the sword's like weapon damage will just like exponentially increase over time. The reason we're using this sword is 1, it has exceptional damage. It's much better than any of the other swords. It also scales with you, so perfect to take into New Game Plus. But the main thing for that extra damage is because with this like set that we're using, the Grandmaster Feline set, that 6 out of 6 bonus, that rear attacks deal 50% more damage and also stun enemies at the cost of 1 adrenaline point, doesn't really matter that much. Most of the time, if not all of the time, you're going to be attacking enemies from the front, so you're not going to get enough triggers for that effect to really go off. And Aerondight is just such a powerful sword that it fits perfectly into this build because we're not really relying on that 6 out of 6 Witcher gear bonus like we would in some of the other builds that we would probably put together or might even talk about that I might put together as well. Let's break down those skills, speaking of them. We'll start with combat skills, and we're going to go through these pretty quickly as I don't want to waste too much of your time. So muscle memory and strength training will increase your strong and fast attack damage by 30%. You want to have both of these. Mainly we're really using fast attacks, but you want to buff those strong attacks just for that initial like setup bonus that we are doing. Precision blows will increase the chance of landing a fast attack critical hit and fast attack critical hit damage. Whirl is the next skill that you'll pick up, and this will drain your stamina pretty quickly when you do like hold down the fast attack button, but you'll do like an AoE attack around you. It's perfect for enemies that surround you and attack you from behind, especially with the new camera where you can't see things from behind you. Obviously you could change it back if you wanted to, but perfect ability to use. Crippling strikes, fast attacks will now also apply bleed. Crushing blows to increase strong attack critical hit chance and critical hit damage for that 1 strong attack we do use a lot of the time in encounters. And sunder armor to reduce enemies damage resistance by 30%. Deadly Precision, so each adrenaline point adds 2% chance of instantly killing an enemy, and this is like not going to trigger very often, but when it does, it's absolutely noticeable and well worth having. Resolve, adrenaline point loss is reduced by 100% when taking damage. Undying, when vitality reaches 0, it will be restored with the bonus of 67%, and it does require an adrenaline point. This is essentially the way that we combat the glass cannonness of this build, or the primary way, so if you do die, this will just instantly revive you. We are also using Razor Focus, so you instantly gain 1 adrenaline point when entering combat, as well as increasing the adrenaline point gain of your just general sword attacks. We're using those adrenaline points primarily just to like stay alive, but also we're putting the buff onto our swords that allows you to use that adrenaline point for like casting a sign to like buff your swords even further. It's like replenishment is kind of like my favorite, I guess, like attachment for swords. So we're using that in basically every build that I put together, but we're not using any sign skills here. We're moving straight into the alchemy line. For the one greater green mutagen that we're using 2 of the skills here. Protective Coating to add 15% protection against attacks from the monster types of the oil that you have put onto the weapon. So if you're fighting an insectoid and you put the insectoid oil onto your blade, you'll get 15% damage reduction from those attacks. Now, depending on your difficulty, you won't need this. You could just go Poison Blade. So oil applied to the blade gives a 50% chance of poisoning the target. Poison's always good to deal. But the main reason we're putting points into this line themselves is to grab Synergy. So Synergy increases the bonus of mutagen placed in the mutation slots by 50%. So we're just like further buffing our attack power by the 3 other greater red mutagens that we do have, plus the greater green mutagen. We get that little bit extra there as well. In the general line, it's really just cat school techniques that you need just to fill that 1 extra spot. So each piece of light armor increases critical hit damage by 25% and fast attack damage by 5%. Because all the armor we're wearing is light armor, this is just a massive bonus to your crit damage as well as the fast attack damage, which is why we're relying on them as well. And for your general mutation, we are using Bloodbath. So each fatal blow dealt by a sword dismembers the enemy and activates a finisher. Each blow dealt by a weapon in melee combat increases attack power by 5%, up to a maximum of 250. So as you can see with everything here, it's really just about the combat skills or abilities and buffing them as much as possible in literally every regard. And you can really just like melt through most enemies. We touched on the runes a little bit before, but we are using the replenishment rune on both of our swords. On your chest piece, I'm using Retribution to give a 30% chance of returning a portion of damage received to the attacker. So if you do take damage, it does go back the other way. You could switch this out for something like Protection or something else, or even just use general runes. For the general runes, anything that buffs like Vitality Regen or Quen Intensity for armor. And then in the early stages, until you have like the money and runes to get like the epic like rune sets that we're talking about here, for the weapons, you could use anything that buffs attack power or bleeding, those kind of different setups there. Now, generally, as mentioned, this is a glass cannon build, and the only other set that you could possibly use here is the bear set, the Ursine set that you could use. This is a heavy set and would be more focused on using strong attacks if you were going to go that route. If you wanted to go that route, I would drop the 4th ability line where we've got the green skills there and go further into Quen, because the Witcher set bonuses for that set are really about that Quen intensity and buffing that. So you could go that, make some sort of tank build that is still sort of in that combat realm if you're really struggling with like dealing damage while staying alive because of how little health we have. It's absolutely something you could do just as an alternative, but for me, this is kind of what's been working, and I've been playing this on Deathmatch and testing the build out and haven't had too many dramas, but it will take you a little while to get going with this build, so relying on some of those defenses is something you could absolutely do. For build tips for this one, I honestly don't have too many that we haven't already discussed, because really the thing with this build is you just swing your sword around. Like, start combat with a strong attack that will then buff your fast attacks, and then just fast attack until they die. It's kind of it. There isn't too much to it. Obviously, you know, we've talked about defenses throughout the video, as well as keeping your Quen up so that you don't take some of that damage, so you don't lose the bonuses from taking damage, like for things like Bloodbath, as well as for the Aerondight sword, because of those stacking bonuses that you've got there. For potions, you know, Thunderbolt's great just to increase that attack power even further. Let me know in the comments what you think about this build. Thanks for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.